No one showed up for my son's heart surgery. Not one familiar face in the white glare of that waiting room. The clock struck 6, the doors swallowed him, and I sat surrounded by strangers holding hands that weren't mine to hold. Hours later, every family left with smiles except me. My chair stayed cold, my phone still silent. 3 days passed before the screen finally lit up. Need $5,000 for your sister's wedding dress. I sent 50 cents with one line by a veil. The next morning, the bank called. And that's when everything in our family cracked wide open. Before I tell you the rest, tell me where are you listening from, so I know I'm not alone. And when you've heard my story, tell me what would you have done in my place. I grew up learning how to disappear quietly. In our house, love had a schedule and it never ran on my time. When I brought home straight A's, Mom said, "Don't brag, Ava gets sensitive." When I fixed the leaky faucet, Dad smiled like it was his idea. I learned early that peace came cheaper than recognition. Ava cried once because she lost a necklace. Mom turned the whole house upside down. When I misplaced my science trophy, she said, "Stop being dramatic, Claire. It's just a thing." I stopped asking for help after that. I started staying out of the way doing the chores, paying the bills when Dad forgot stepping in when Ava fell apart over small things. I became the quiet one, the reliable one, the one no one checks on because she's fine. When I got my first steady job at the hospital, Mom called to say, "You're lucky to have it, honey. Maybe you can help Ava get started with her business." Ava hadn't even graduated yet. I said sure, because that's what I always said, sure. Then came the conversation that sealed the pattern. Mom and Dad sat at my kitchen table, hands folded like they were about to pray. "It would just make things easier if we had access to your savings," Mom said. "You know, in case of emergencies. Family helps family." I hesitated, but Dad added, "You're always so organized, Claire. We'd never touch a cent unless it was necessary." They left with signed papers calling me their responsible girl. I remember the smell of coffee cooling between us, the silence after they closed the door. That was the moment I realized I'd just handed over more than access, I'd handed over permission. Over the years, emergencies looked like a broken dishwasher at their house, a vacation deposit for Ava, or a bridal shower fund. Every withdrawal came with a thank you text that read more like a receipt, "You're a lifesaver." Never a call, never a visit. Just expectations dressed up as gratitude. Still, I stayed quiet. When Ava bragged about how Mom always believed in her, I smiled. When Dad told people both our girls are doing great, I nodded, though I knew only one of us got saved seats at the table. The last time I saw them before Leo's surgery, we were at Sunday dinner. Ava talked about her upcoming wedding, how everything had to be perfect. Mom leaned in, glowing, "It'll be the event of the year." No one asked about Leo's condition, not once. I passed the mashed potatoes, pretending not to notice, pretending not to care. But I did. I always did. That night after they left, I sat at the kitchen counter reviewing Bill's hospital forms and pre-surgery checklists. Leo was asleep on the couch, his small chest rising beneath the blanket. My phone buzzed a group chat message, "Ava's dress fitting tomorrow. Can everyone pitch in for the final payment?" I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. I didn't reply. I just opened my folder labeled Leo, appointments, and kept checking every box, every form, every instruction. Because that's what I do. I show up, even when they don't. 3 days after Leo's surgery, the house was too quiet. The hum of the air purifier, the click of the clock, everything sounded louder than it should. Leo slept on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that still smelled like the hospital. His chest rose carefully, each breath measured fragile. I made soup and kept the volume low, afraid of disturbing the only kind of peace we had left. My phone sat face down on the counter. No missed calls, no messages. No one had come. Not my parents, not my siblings. They all knew the date. They'd promised. When the timer beeped, I turned off the stove. That's when it buzzed 3 short vibrations, 1 message. I almost smiled, thinking maybe it was a check-in. I wiped my hands and picked it up. "Mom, need $5,000 for your sister's wedding dress. Everyone's contributing by Friday." The steam from the pot fogged my glasses. I read it again slower this time, as if the words might change. They didn't. There was no, "How's Leo?" No how are you holding up just numbers? A deadline. I stood there, spoon in hand, soup cooling on the stove. In the other room, Leo coughed in his sleep. I didn't answer. I didn't throw the phone either. I just set it down and stared at it until the screen dimmed. The reflection of the kitchen light hovered where my face should have been. Later, I scrolled through old messages looking for something, anything that might prove they'd once cared. There wasn't much, mostly logistics, venues, photos of Ava in white. For years, I'd told myself that silence from family wasn't rejection, just noise management, that maybe being overlooked was safer than being resented. But standing in that kitchen, the truth settled cold in my chest. It wasn't that they forgot. It was that they chose not to remember. I poured the soup into a bowl, placed it on the counter, and turned off the lights. The house fell dark except for the faint glow from Leo's room. That's when I knew the next message I'd send would end this pattern for good. I didn't reply to my mother's message. I just stared at it until the glow faded and the screen went black. Then I turned the phone over screen down like burying something. Leo slept soundly that night for the first time since the surgery. The quiet wasn't comfort. It was space wide enough for me to think without interruption. I sat at the kitchen counter, a single lamp cutting through the dark, the light pooling over Bill's receipts and hospital discharge papers. All the things I had kept organized because no one else ever did. I opened my banking app. The balance blinked up at me, my emergency fund, the same one I'd built over years of late-night overtime side projects, canceled vacations, the same one my parents had access to for emergencies. That word emergency had meant something different to them. Broken dishwasher emergency, Ava's rehearsal dinner deposit emergency, Leo's open heart surgery. Not even a mention. I scrolled through past transfers, each one a quiet record of my compliance. $200, $500, $1,000. Little pieces of myself signed away under the illusion of family duty. I tapped the transfer icon and entered $0, $50. In the note field, I typed "by avail." Then I hit send. The confirmation sound was soft, like a tiny bell. I exhaled through my nose and turned the phone off. There was no satisfaction yet, only stillness. The next morning, the house filled with the scent of toast and coffee. Leo sat at the table sketching rockets on the back of an envelope. "Can we visit Grandma after I get better?" he asked. "Not right now, sweetheart," I said. My voice was calm even. "They're busy with wedding stuff." He nodded, accepting it more easily than I ever had. When he left for his follow-up appointment with the nurse that afternoon, I opened my laptop. The login screen glowed pale blue. I typed my password and went straight to account management. The cursor blinked, waiting. Remove joint access. Click. Confirm removal for Linda Whitman. Click. Confirm removal for Gerald Whitman. Click. Each action had a sound, an echo of paper being torn cleanly from a binder. Then, change password. Enable two-step verification. Save confirmation email to folder statements. The printer hummed as I printed the confirmation page. I folded it in half and slid it into a manila folder labeled Access Removed. A new tab in my life filed and sealed. By noon, the house was filled with the rhythmic clicks of my keyboard, the hum of the refrigerator, the low buzz of the printer. No music, no voices, just the sound of systems being rebuilt. At 2:10 p.m., my doorbell rang. I knew that knock impatient, loud familiar. Caleb. When I opened the door, he stood with his hands shoved into his jacket pockets, eyes darting anywhere but mine. "Mom's upset," he said. "She says you froze her account." "It's my account," I said quietly. He frowned. "She said it was family money." "It's not. Every dollar in there came from me. She said I promised to help in emergencies." I let the pause sit. Leo's surgery was an emergency. They didn't show up. That promise expired. Caleb shifted, guilt flickering in his expression. "You could have told us how serious it was." "I did." I met his eyes. "You just didn't want to hear it." For a second, the old habit rose to explain, to soften, to make him comfortable. "I didn't." He sighed. "Mom said you sent her 50 cents. "I did." He blinked. "Why?" "Because that's exactly what her concern was worth." He didn't argue. He just looked at me the way someone looks at a stranger they used to know. Then he left. When the door clicked shut, I leaned against it and exhaled. My pulse was steady. My hands didn't shake. For the first time, my silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like structure. That evening, I sat beside Leo as he drew more rockets. The TV was muted, the room bathed in gold from the setting sun. My phone buzzed on the counter calls from unknown numbers one after another. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my email. A message from the bank access changes confirmed. All previous authorizations have been revoked. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to remember this feeling, the precise, quiet moment when control returned. I printed the email, slipped it into the folder, and labeled it proof. After dinner, I tucked Leo into bed. He fell asleep mid-sentence, his hand curled around mine. I watched his chest rise and fall, the faint scar catching the lamplight. That scar was proof, too, of endurance, of what was worth protecting. In the kitchen, I poured myself water and stared out the window. Across the street, lights flicked on in other homes, families gathering, laughing, existing without me. And for once, that didn't sting, because tonight I wasn't excluded. I had chosen absence. Before going to bed, I took one last look at my folder, the tidy stack of confirmations dates and signatures. Evidence not of revenge, but of correction. I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and let the silence stay. This time, it belonged to me. The next morning began like any other gray light slipping through the blinds, the quiet hum of a refrigerator, Leo still asleep. I poured coffee and watched the steam twist up from the mug, the house holding its breath. The phone rang once, twice, then stopped. A few seconds later, it rang again. Unknown number. I answered. Ms. Whitman, this is Ethan Cole from Pacific Union Bank. His tone was courteous, measured. Your mother is here in my office. She says she's having trouble accessing an account you share. I stared at the wall at a crack running up from the baseboard. There's no shared account, I said evenly. She was an authorized user. That access has been revoked. A pause on the line. Understood. She's insisting it's a family fund, not an individual account. It's my savings, I replied. Every deposit came from my paychecks. There's nothing to dispute. Through the receiver, I could hear muffled voices, my mother's pitch rising sharp, desperate. Tell her she can't just take our money. Tell her. Mr. Cole's voice stayed calm. Would you like me to explain the policy to her? Yes, I said, and please note the time of this call for your records. He hesitated as if realizing something larger was unfolding, then said, Of course. The line went silent. Then a soft click. I set the phone down. The clock on the wall ticked once, twice, loud enough to sound like applause in an empty theater. An hour later, someone pounded on the door. Hard. I didn't move. The knocks came again, then a familiar voice shouting through the wood. Clare. You can't do this, Mom's in tears, Ava. I opened the door just enough for her voice to meet mine. You skipped my son's surgery for cake tastings, I said. Don't lecture me about tears. Her face twisted. That's not fair. No, I said it isn't. She pushed forward, but the chain lock held. You think freezing Mom's access fixes anything? You've humiliated her? She humiliated herself, I said quietly. All I did was log out. For a second, neither of us spoke. Her eyes darted behind me to the stack of papers on the table, the tidy folders labeled in blue ink. Evidence of a woman who'd stopped asking for permission. You're destroying this family, Ava whispered. No, I said, voice steady. I'm just not funding it anymore. She left without slamming the door, which somehow felt louder. By noon, the calls slowed. By 2, they stopped. I sat with the stillness sipping coffee that had gone cold, the mug heavy in my hands. Through the window, the world carried on traffic lights, changing people crossing streets, none of them knowing that a quiet war had ended in my kitchen. Later that evening, an email arrived from the bank. Account audit complete. All external access permanently closed. Confirmation attached. I downloaded the PDF and printed it. The sound of the printer spooling was soft, rhythmic. Final. Leo woke and padded into the kitchen, hair messy, pajamas wrinkled. Mom, he said, can we make pancakes tomorrow? Of course, I said, smoothing his hair. He smiled and went back to bed. The house went silent again, but this time the quiet wasn't empty, it was earned. I slid the printed confirmation into the folder marked proof and locked it in the drawer. A small act of ceremony, unspoken but complete. Outside, the last light faded. The blinds cast thin shadows across the table where my phone used to buzz endlessly. Now it just lay there, face down, motionless. I closed my eyes and listened to nothing. The kind of nothing that meant everything had finally stopped moving. 2 months passed. The days found their rhythm again. School drop-offs, grocery lists, small talks with neighbors who didn't know anything about the storm that had come and gone. Leo healed faster than I expected. The scar on his chest had turned from red to pale pink, a thin line catching the light when he lifted his shirt to show me how strong he'd gotten. We lived slower now. Mornings smelled like pancakes and coffee instead of antiseptic and worry. I'd stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. The silence that once scraped raw had softened into something like calm. One evening near dusk, the doorbell rang. A delivery envelope sat on the doormat, no return address, just my name in my father's handwriting. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a letter folded once neatly. Claire, it read, we were wrong. The wedding wasn't an emergency. Leo's surgery was. We chose wrong and we hurt you both. This check isn't for you to cash. It's to remind you of the value we forgot. I don't expect forgiveness only for you to know that I finally understand. I read it twice, then laid the check on the counter beside the cooling kettle. The paper fluttered in the air from the open window, a faint sound like breathing. Leo came into the kitchen barefoot, clutching his favorite blanket. Mom, who's it from Grandpa? I said. He wrote to say he's sorry. Leo frowned. Does that mean we have to see them? No, I said softly. It just means they're learning. We don't have to open the door until we're ready. He nodded satisfied and wandered back to the living room. The sun was sinking the apartment, glowing in soft gold. I folded the letter and slipped it into my folder right behind the bank confirmation. Proof of 2 things, what was taken and what was finally mine again. Through the window, I could see our reflections on the glass, 2 shapes side by side, steady and unbroken. I didn't cash the check. I just let the silence keep it. Family isn't a debt to keep paying. It's a choice to keep or to let go. I used to think peace meant fixing everything that broke between us. Now I know peace is what's left when you stop explaining yourself, and the silence finally sounds like home. If this story hit close to home, stay till the next one. Some wounds don't need revenge, they need release. Tell me where you're watching from and what peace looks like to you. Because maybe somewhere out there someone's learning that silence can be the loudest answer of all.